Hello and welcome to The Hero Spouse. I'm Kendra Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and midlife crisis. Today we have Sandy. Sandy has a bomb drop of July 1st, 2016, and a date of marriage of 1992. Her husband is a boomerang, and she said she's not familiar with energy level terms. I'm going to guess high energy, however. She says, my husband started out as a boomerang, but since 2020 he's become a vanisher. So contact type changing. And that's not what usually happens, but it's also not off the spectrum for once you've passed a certain point of time in MLC. They can start to drop off. The first few years are where we're really looking at that contact status. And if maybe it feels like you're really separated, you're really done. In this case, they're not divorced yet. It may still feel like it's an emotional divorce. It's a divorce with everything other than he pays the bills and on paper. It's not abnormal for them to become more distant. Imagine if you divorced and you just, years went by. Your lives grow further and further apart. So that could be part of what we're seeing. But let's go on. He's become a vanisher since 2020. That was 4 years in. This is when I put down boundaries, as he was verbally abusive to me. So do you mean that he vanished when you put down boundaries, not vanished and then you put down boundaries? That's what. Okay, so his vanishing was a result of the boundaries, and he was verbally abusive to you and when your kids were not around. I have adult kids who have no contact with him other than getting the odd happy birthday text with no follow-up. My kids are disgusted with his behavior and have had it out with him several times. We don't know where he lives. However, he still pays the bills. He has recently started divorce proceedings, but he's screamed divorce in the past without following through. So, in other words, we will see. And if you would like to follow through, you can certainly do that. I just don't understand, from a loving husband and a devoted father and son, he became this cold and nasty individual, neglecting his responsibilities. I feel that I've healed enough now to accept that it would not be right for him to come back. But I still have been left with unanswered questions. Will he ever return back to his old self again? Or is this him from now onwards? How can I tell if he has someone else in his life and he's moved on? Okay. So the second part, how can I tell if I have someone else and he's moved on? You can ask. You can look and see if there's social media out there. You could see if there's a grapevine. Does it matter? I mean, does it matter if you feel you've healed? You're not standing anymore because you've said it would not be right. Not that you don't want him back, but it would not be right for him to come back. I'm assuming, given the bridges that have been burned. In other words, he burned them with his abusive behaviors. The real question is how did a good person become this monster? And the monster seems to have gripped on and holding on. The second question, how can I tell if someone else is in his life and he's moved on, is a curiosity. He is, at this point, possibly very likely to grow into a cranky old codger. And cranky old codgers are MLCers / former MLCers. I mean, is it fair if they're 80 and they're still stuck in that negative personality that we say you're in a midlife crisis? It just held on. And so he may become a cranky old codger and stick with it. Does that mean that's who he really is? It doesn't mean that's who he is. It doesn't have to. That core person may still be in there. It just may not come out. And I can't tell you that. But if my view on it is, if the core person was really who they were, then the core person isn't gone. But let's look at some other things, okay? Much of midlife crisis has its roots in childhood and family issues, childhood trauma, family of origin issues. And oftentimes we don't know about these. And when I say we, I mean the person who has them. They may have not realized the extent of them. You don't know if you have something missing sometimes. You don't know that you're lacking this coping skill because you don't have it. Remember, ignorance is bliss. You don't know what you're missing. And then something comes along where that coping skill is really important in life. And you aren't able to function, and you then turn toward negative coping skills. And how do you get out of it? Sometimes we get out of it by having people there. Sometimes that doesn't matter. It doesn't help. Sometimes there are enough people to pull us backwards and down. He's so afraid, and he hasn't gone through and worked through these issues. And there's a lot of self-hatred in there. And it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy and just continue to cycle you down into the darkness of your shadow. Sure, is there a rock bottom? Yes. Do we have spoons, drills, hands for digging? Yes. So in that sense, rock bottom is meaningless, or it's a potential. But with desperation and to enough fear, they'll go further deep, further down, okay? So I can't tell you whether he will or whether he won't. If he doesn't have a guiding light for him. Think about how we say for kids, and they grow up in a really difficult trauma-induced environment. And then we say that one person can help. That one mentor in the coach in school, whatever. One person who cares enough about them. We don't even mean their caregiver. They can have one person can make the entire difference. Isn't that also then true for somebody who is 55, 60, 45? That person who is stuck in their MLC, can one person make the difference? Sure. Of course, it doesn't mean that one person will make the difference. There are plenty of kids out there who the coach didn't reach. The coach was reaching out and maybe even holding their hand, and they still slipped through. In fact, that brilliant mentor might have one. They're still a brilliant mentor. They might have one that thrived. And that would be such a blessing for that person to have that one. And maybe the others, some of them survived. And some of them didn't. Some of them got lost. So he may find one person. Maybe he won't. But with the abuse you've taken, it doesn't mean you have to be that one person. And you set up those boundaries because you couldn't handle being that one person. It's okay. It's okay. But I can't tell you. What happens with midlife is something happens. Something triggers us. And we don't necessarily realize the damage from before. And then this trigger, and it brings up this stuff. And sometimes we don't know why it's bringing it up. It might be a raw form of anger that is hit by a trigger. Dad dies, there's this trigger, but maybe it's so subconscious we don't know why the anger is there, but it's really at things that were done to us as a child. But all we feel is the emotion. We don't have the memory of concrete actions, events that are causing that emotion. So all he knows now is Dad died, trigger. Feeling anger, feeling self-questioning, all of those things that come, the questions that come with midlife. So that comes as this shock from this once loving person. Now, how does he go back from that? He doesn't know. He is working through these things, and he's been working through them for a long time. And if he has enough people in his life that will enable him, then who's to stop it from keeping that way? It is a big hurdle to change your life and improve it. And he got knocked off of it. Imagine you come by and you get knocked out by a boulder. It's easy to jump over that trigger, to get through the trigger, to get triggered. Because when you're a really nice person, doesn't it seem like a big hurdle to turn into that cruel person? But something happens. We don't always know what. Something happens, and it triggers things deep inside. And that's really not going to answer your questions. It can answer them in a vague way. How did someone who is so nice, wonderful, great father, responsible, become the opposite? Sometimes it could be because of the facade. Have they been living a facade? And maybe the facade was part real, but they didn't believe in it. So if they grew up on this side of the tracks and now they've made it on this side, maybe they really are this person, but they don't believe they're that person because they came from over here. If they feel they're being a fake, even if they're not, what does that do to them? If they don't feel authentic within themselves, within who they are, and maybe now they feel, well, I lived my life for everybody else, and I resent it. And what happens when you resent something? Resentment is not a positive emotion. at least if you hold on to it. If you hold on to resentment, rather than saying, I resent this, I'm going to let go of it so I can, as part of fixing the resentment and make some amends within myself to figure out how to let go of the resentment and fix what it is that I resent. Realign myself, or reframe what happened to me in the past, or go fix some things that went wrong, even if it was somebody else doing the wrong. I'm responsible for my part in how I feel and fix it. So if I was abused, if I was sexually abused, it's not my fault. But as an adult, my healing is my responsibility. I have to do something. I have to take the initiative, take the power to fix and to heal. Even though what happened to me wasn't my fault. How we respond to it is our fault. It's within our power. And he's not responding well. He's been reacting. And it happened as a shock. Often when something happens as a shock that's unexpected, it's a reaction we get instead of a response. We react. We're human. But did he feel like he spent years being responsible? The good son, nice. Oh, he's such a nice person. And everybody had this view of him. And if he felt that view wasn't accurate, even if it was, what does that do to him now? It means he doesn't really know who he is, even if that is who he really was. He doesn't feel comfortable coming back to it. And now, after the being nasty, let's say he can start to believe, that really is who I was. But now I've been this, and now he doesn't know how to come back to the good person. You've got the angel and the devil. The devil takes over and does horrible, cruel, abusive things. And then feels shame and guilt. But they look at that angel who is them also. Like, I can't be that anymore. And that's when we have to realize the angel and the devil that are on your shoulders, they're one person. We are saint and sinner, all of us. And he may be having trouble coming to terms and accepting and integrating the bad and the good together because he's so ashamed of the bad and so doubtful of the good. It's just a guess. I can't say for sure. But those are the thoughts that come to me when reading what you're saying, okay? I hope this is helpful, and I hope that you can get some sense of closure. And I will see everybody in the next question.